Hi there, and welcome back to this video series on the CCNA Security Exam, Implementing Cisco IOS Network Security. This is the fourth video in Section 2, Security and Cisco Routers. In this video, we would learn about privilege levels. We'll see how to use the enable, the line privilege, and the user privilege to gain access to the privilege exec mode. Now let's begin. Let's take a look at where we stopped from the last video. Show run, and I'll just show the config that relates to the line, which is what we set up for the telnet, if you remember in the last video. So we have a password, but right now the password is not functioning because we're using the local login command. So if we go to R2 and log in, telnet 1.1.1, notice that we connect using the username and the password that we set for Bob. Now at this point, I would just like to stop and show you what privilege level we are currently on. By default, when Bob logs in, he's put in the user exec mode. Now using the show privilege command, you can see what level you are on. So the current privilege level is 1. Privilege levels specify what one can do while on a router. So think of it like this. The CEO of an organization has access to all the information pertaining to that organization, financial accounts, the clients they have, and things like that. So we can say the CEO is at the highest level of authority. Now, one step below, you could have like the manager of a functional department. So he's on a privilege level lower than that of the CEO, and so on and so forth. That's the way it is with the Cisco router. When you're connected to your console, you are usually placed at privilege level 15, although we changed that in some video. We'll see how all these things work in this particular video. What you need to know is that right now we're on a privilege level of 1. This is the default when you log in via Telnet or via SSH, and we'll see why this is the default. Now you're probably familiar with how to get into the privilege exec mode by typing the enable command. Enable, and then our password was Cisco. Now if we do the show privilege command again, notice now that we are placed on privilege level of 15. This tells you that this is the first way to get into the privilege exec mode. To gain access to the privilege exec mode, you can do so by typing the enable password or the enable secret, whichever one is configured. Now I'm just going to exit out of this and we'll go back to R1 and do some configs. Now the second method that we're going to consider for gaining access to the privilege exec mode is the line privilege itself. We saw this on the console line before we changed it. It was this privilege level command, and we're going to see how it works. You can actually set this privilege for the entire line. So it means anybody who connects on that line will be placed at that privilege level. But as we'll see, this default behavior can be overridden. For this to work, I'm just going to change the login. I'm going to remove it from local username login to just the plain login. And then I'm going to set a privilege level of 15. Now let's go to R2 and see what happens. Telnet 1.1. Now as you notice, I've turned off username and password checking, so it only asks me for the password. And the password we set was Cisco. Notice straight away that I am placed in the privilege exec mode. Show privilege. As you can see, I'm in 15. It means straight away it places me into privilege level of 15. Because of this command that we have here. So what this command does is that everybody who connects on that line will be placed at the privilege level that is set or that is configured for that VTY line or for that console line or for that aux line. By default, the configuration on the console line and the aux line are usually placed on privilege level of 15. That's why the default behavior of the console is that you are placed at a privilege level of 15. Although we changed that for R1. Let's see that for R2. Let me just exit out of this. Show run for line. Okay, so that's that command there, privilege level of 15. So if I exit now and I press enter, you see that I'm placed directly in the privilege level of 15. Show privilege of 15. That's the default behavior of Cisco routers. So by default, they have this command, privilege level of 15, under the console and under the aux port. However, for VTY lines, there's nothing like that. Now let's go back to R1. You notice that I had to change this back to login for this to work. I'll show you why it did not work. I'll change it back to login local, so it checks for username and password. And even with the privilege level of 15 that is there, we'll try to log into R1 again. Telnet 1.1.1. And it asks me for a username Bob and a password. The password is Cisco1. Now you can see that I'm at a privilege level of 1. That's because if we go back to R1, we find that this login local basically changes the way the router thinks. Instead of just requiring you for a password, it requires a username and a password. And what it also does is it checks the privilege level configured for that user. So even though the privilege level of 15 is configured on the entire line, it's actually checking the local database for the username and password, and that's the privilege level it's going to use, not the one on the line. This brings us to the third method by which someone can gain access to the privilege exec mode. Let's look at our configuration. Now if you remember, we configured the username of Bob and we configured the username of Fred, and we only gave them their respective passwords. Now let's change that, or rather let's add another user. So let's call this Alice. Now notice the options that you can configure under Alice. We have configured the secret. Remember that secret and password are the same thing. Secret just uses MD5, while password can be unencrypted, or you could use the Vigenère algorithm. But now notice this privilege command. You can actually set the privilege that a user is supposed to be on. So let's set that command now. Privilege between 0 and 15. So let's place Alice on a privilege level of say 3, and then give her a password of Cisco 3, for example. Now let's create another user called Aaron. We'll give Aaron a privilege level of 15 and give him a secret of Cisco 15. Right, now something you have to be very careful of here is your privilege level has to come before your secret command. Else it's going to take your password as everything after the secret command or after the password command. So what I mean is, if you do something like this, say 4, your password is actually going to be Cisco test privilege 4. So this is something you have to be very careful about. Alright, so we've configured this for Alice and for Aaron. Now let's go back to R2 and see what happens. I just exit. Telnet to 1.1.1. Now he asks me for a username. We configured Alice and we gave her a password of Cisco 3. You'll notice that it's not the greater than sign, it's actually the pound sign, meaning we're not in the user exec mode. So let's check what privilege level that we are on. And that's it. We're on privilege level 3, which is what we configured. If we go back to R1, which is what we configured for Alice, privilege level of 3. That means it's actually now checking the privilege level based on the username. So let's just exit and log in with Aaron. Aaron, password is Cisco 15. Show privilege. And that's it. We have a privilege level of 15. Let's stop our configuration here for a while and do a recap of what we've learned so far. So we have seen that there are 3 basic ways by which one can gain access to the privilege exec mode. The first is the enable command. Either you have the enable secret or you have the enable password. The second one is the line privilege, but this only works if you have the login command rather than the login local. And then you have the user privilege, which checks for the privilege of the user, and this works when you have the login local command. Something I'll really advise you to familiarize yourself with is this login command, because it actually changes the way things work. Now you need to understand that these are the 3 basic methods by which one gains access to the privilege exec mode. There are other advanced methods, as we'll see under AAA. I hope this video has been informative and I would like to thank you for watching.